Welcome to Elevate and Thrive, Breaking Barriers for an Empowered Life. I'm your host, Jen Smith, and I am so excited to be on this journey with you. In this podcast, we are going to dive deep into the transformative stories of individuals who have faced adversity head on, emerged stronger, wiser, and more empowered. I'm here to share those stories with you, to remind you that no matter how dark the night may seem, there is always light at the end of the tunnel, and there is a sunrise waiting to greet you. To inspire you to break through your own barriers, rewrite your own story, and to step into the light of your true potential. So whether you're facing your own challenges or simply seeking inspiration to elevate your life, know that you have come to the right place. Together, we are going to break barriers, defy expectations, and soar to new heights. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. I cannot wait to see where it takes us. Remember, you are worthy, you are enough, and your journey to an empowered life starts now. Welcome, everybody. Today we have an amazing guest. His name is Tim McDonald, and he has a powerful story to tell of survival, thriving, and finding the good in a really hard situation. And so I'm really excited to have him on the podcast today. Tim is a survivor of stage 4 colon cancer. He is a husband, a father, a grandfather to his grandkids, and I am super excited to have him on our podcast today and just hear his story. So, Tim, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. And I would absolutely love to hear those moments where your journey started with this situation. Can you take us back to the circumstances that led to you finding out that you had cancer, and then what happened after that?
Yeah, well, I had, it was in 2020. So right when good old COVID pandemic came and visited us in the world, as I had just left a job in February, to go out and start trying to speak professionally full time. And right when I got back from my first paid speaking gig down in Tulum, Mexico, about 2 weeks later, they shut down everything in the US. And we were on lockdown in our house. And my wife and I just looked at it as, you know what, let's just try and make the best of the situation, not worry about, man, we miss going out. It's like, how do we find ways where we can go out and do things without being around other people? We hired our musician from our local restaurant to get on a Zoom with us and our friends that we used to go to the restaurant with, and we'd all be on Zoom, enjoying a cocktail with some appetizers, listening to our musician play a couple of songs for us. And we were just making the best of it. And later that year, it was right in November, I started experiencing some symptoms, nothing that I really paid too much attention to. It was just every once in a while I get like a weird pain in my back. Sometimes I'd get like night sweats or chills during the middle of the day when it was like 90 degrees outside, and they weren't consistent and they weren't like something that I thought, oh, something's wrong here. But on Thanksgiving of November 2020, I woke up and I had a bad pain in my right side, lower right side. And I told my wife, and she goes, you really should go to the urgent care. And because there's one that we can walk to in our neighborhood. And I said, no, I'll just wait until Monday, see if it goes away. Friday, same thing, a little worse. She's like, go. And I'm like, no, I'll just wait. Saturday, same thing. It's worse. Just go. I'm like, no, I'll just wait. I woke up Sunday, got up before her. This is when you had to make appointments to go to the urgent care, online. And I got up before she did, and she came downstairs, and I said, I have an appointment at 8:30 over at the urgent care. And she goes, I thought you were waiting till tomorrow. And I'm like, it's not getting any better. It hurts more. And so I went in. They weren't sure what was wrong, but they ordered a CT scan for me to do some further investigation of what was happening. So I got the order, and on Monday morning, I called and got my CT scan scheduled for just in a couple hours. Walked over, got my CT scan, came home. They said, do not call us for the results. Your referring physician will call you, the urgent care. So I get a call a few hours later from the urgent care, and they said, can you come into our office? And I'm like, yeah, when do you want me? And they're like, how quick can you get here? And I'm like, I can be there in 5 minutes. And so I remember joking with my wife because we thought maybe it was kidney stones that, hey, this isn't going to be that bad, right? Maybe I could just take some pills to destroy the kidney stones or something. And I remember joking with her going, well, I guess if they need me to come in like this, or it's not going to be as simple as calling in a prescription for me. And I went over and I knew something was up when you walk in the doctor's office in the urgent care and the first thing you got to do is register and then they ask you to sit down. They just said, oh, you're Mr. McDonald, come on back.
Oh,
And they
wow.
brought me into a room, and 2 seconds later, the doctor comes in with one piece of paper in his hand. And the first three words out of his mouth was, you have cancer. And I just sat there and I kind of had a smile on my face, like, okay, and he's telling me all this stuff about it, how it's almost a complete blockage in my colon. My liver looks like it's covered in it. And I didn't know anything about this at the time. So I had no idea that this was terminal. I had no idea that this was anything, but that's how I found out. And my reaction to him, he actually was asking me if I was okay, thinking maybe I should, he should call my wife to come get me because I wasn't crying. I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry about it. I was just very matter of fact, like, okay, what do we need to do next? And he knows me because I saw him once a year since we had moved here. So it's kind of like my primary doctor, even though he was an urgent care guy. And he knew I didn't really have insurance. And he goes, I used to work in an ER down in St. Pete. Do you mind driving that far? And I said, no. And he goes, let me text my friend who's a GI doctor down in St. Pete. And that same afternoon, my wife and I drove down to the GI doctor, got my colonoscopy scheduled for 3 days later, because at that time you still need to get the COVID test and wait 2 days for the results before you went in. So that was as soon as I could get it done. And I got my colonoscopy and they put a stent in. And which, when you have colon cancer, if you have a blockage in your colon, what happens is sometimes they can put a stent in to open up the opening so that, all your waste can still pass. Other times, depending on where it's at and how big it is, they might have to give you a bag, or an ostomy is what it's called, a lot of times. And it's basically a hole outside of your colon that comes through your stomach that you wear a bag on. I'm sure people have seen pictures of it, probably think it's gross, but now that I've been impacted by this and know so many people, I know it's not gross. It's actually part of who they are, just like my scar from my, we'll get into this later, but the scars that I got from my surgeries are part of who I am, part of my story. And that's what I think is so beautiful about these people that are willing to share that and show that off, on social media. It's not to be glamorous. It's not to be, oh, look at me, poor me. It's to embrace, here's who I am in all my beauty. And that's a beautiful thing to me.
I think that's so beautiful because these heavy things happen in life. And on the subject of cancer, I personally I haven't had it, but I've people that I am very close to, people that I love and care about have been touched firsthand with it. And this is something that I think a lot of people can relate to on some level of having either gone through an experience or somebody that you love or care about dealing with this situation. A couple of things stood out to me when you were telling me that story of, first of all, when you were told what's going on and how you were just so matter of fact, what was happening in that moment in your head? Was it feeling a little bit numb or not processing it? Or was it jumping straight into, okay, what do we do?
My head was not burying it or ignoring it in any way. It was actually probably in high speed gear, processing everything. But what I've done even before I was diagnosed was I probably about 7 years before that, when we were up in New York, and I worked at HuffPost, and I got to understand the importance of, consciousness and mindfulness and breathing and all this stuff. And I've talked to so many people who are really into this. And I've really, I'm not by any means an expert at this, but I really work hard and every day and continually try and improve on how I process what's happening around me that is out of my control. Because so much of what we react to is not in our control, yet we react like we were responsible for it, or that it's happening to us when it shouldn't be. And the reality is 90% of our lives, we have no control over. And so just embracing that. And my whole philosophy is kind of turned into everything in life has a lesson. And in that moment when I was processing this, that's what I was trying to ask myself. What am I supposed to learn from this? What am I supposed to do with this? It's not that I'm upset that it's not why me. It's almost like why not me, right? Like this is happening to me because I need to go do something with it. And I think that was there's two things that were difficult. One was starting to try and figure out what that was. And the other thing was I knew that I could process this mentally. I knew my wife was in a very different state than I was from a mental aspect about processing information like this. And so it was, how do I comfort her and how do I figure out what's happening and what my why is? And that was what was going through my head, in all honesty, right from the very get-go. And I think the other thing was, and maybe it was a little bit of naivety, but I never thought that this was going to take me down. Never. I mean, even from the time he told me, even from the time I learned shortly after that stage 4 was terminal, even though I learned that, people that get diagnosed in the condition I'm at typically don't live more than 3 years. And it's like, no, but I didn't know any of that. But even when I heard those things, I still told myself and believed in myself. And I told my wife and had her believe in me that this was not going to take me down.
I am such a huge believer in the power of thought in our belief systems. And I just want to really acknowledge you, because in that moment, what I heard was you made a choice based on the work that you've done with yourself, right? It's like when you're on this journey of discovery and leveling up and learning about yourself. And like you said, there's so many things that happen in life that are out of our control. And it can get so easy to get caught up in that stuff. But in that moment, it sounds like you made an empowered choice on how you were going to process that information. And that's because of the work that you've done with your mindset and the belief systems that you had. And I truly believe that our beliefs create our reality. And so your belief of this is not going to take me down, I think that is just one of the most powerful things. So if you could say anything to somebody that's going through something similar right now, maybe they just found out that somebody that they loved or themselves have some sort of cancer coming up in their lives, or just a really hard situation that's out of their control, maybe another health situation. Is there any advice that you could give to somebody that might be in a similar situation?
Absolutely. And this is what I actually did when I first started working on this. When I felt my emotions starting to rise up, I would, one, acknowledge that it was happening. That's the key, is once you become conscious that you're starting to react in a certain way, that is the first step. Don't beat yourself up if you don't catch it right away, or if you go through your whole reaction without realizing it, because over time, when you keep doing this, you will get much better at it. But that's how I started. And then the next step from there is, once you can kind of catch it before your emotions rise all the way up, is just mentally, I ask myself, in similar situations like this before, how have I reacted? Kind of the same way that I'm about to react right now. How did that work out for me? Probably not too good, because this is why I'm trying to change how I'm reacting to this. So what can I do differently? How can I react differently to this situation? Not knowing what the outcome is going to be, but knowing that it probably will not be the same exact outcome if I respond the way I usually do. I just started doing that over and over and over again. My thing was, I was trying to work on my temper with my wife, because most people who know me are really shocked that I have a temper. But I used to have a really bad temper. Now it's much more subdued, but I credit the work that I've done in this area to help me kind of bring it down to a much more manageable level. So when I started getting upset with her, that's exactly what I was doing. I was acknowledging that it was happening. And then I eventually got to a point where I could catch it. I could count to like 5 or 10. It started at 10 and then I moved it down to 5. And then I could just jump into it, acknowledge it, count to 10, and then say, okay, I'm a little bit calmer now. How can I react differently? And it changes everything. It really changes everything.
It absolutely does. What it starts with is that awareness and that decision to do it differently. And then it's those internal conversations that we are having with ourselves. So I love the fact that you were asking yourself questions. What can I do differently? How can I react differently? I think most people, and especially in a situation like this, go straight into fear mode. They get really worried about what could happen or what the outcomes could be. And that just kind of trumps everything else. Taking those deep breaths and that really conscious decision to be aware of the internal conversation that's happening in your head is, in my opinion, how you take your power back in a situation that you might not have control over, but that itself is a sense of control, because you can control how you react to a situation. You can control how you react to people around you, like you said. So if your natural tendency is to have some anger come up in certain situations, having that awareness and that internal conversation and asking yourself those questions is so, so powerful. I really, really commend you for doing that. What was the thing that helped you get to that point of being able to do that? So you talked a little bit about doing some personal development and working on yourself. Can you go a little bit more into that?
Yeah, well, I think the other thing that I started doing after I kind of got a little bit better at recognizing my emotions and, changing my responses to the reactions that were happening, I started having conversations. And this is going to sound so goofy, but it actually worked. I started on actual pen and paper, and now I just do them in my head really quick. But I have conversations with my ego. And I know we have many different egos in ourself. The guy who was working with me told me to call it God. I don't feel comfortable doing that, so I just called mine my ego and not God. But you can do what works for you. But really what you are doing is you're creating a live script, interacting, like writing down the conversation as it happens, but you're the one writing it. So you're going to have a conversation with your ego, and then you're going to actually like, hi, ego, how are you today? Ego, I'm fine. How are you? Great. Would you be open to having a conversation with me? Well, yes, I would. That kind of dialogue. And usually it was going to ask my ego about something that I was kind of fearful about or not understanding why I was feeling the way I did, and asking it why it was doing this to me, why it was making me feel this way. And usually when I got down to the root cause, at least in my situation, was my ego was always reminding me about the other times that were big decisions that were so messy and so bad. But you know what? When I had that real dialogue with my ego, it was bringing up everything before the good that happened, not the good that resulted from everything that I went through to get there. And so what my job was in that dialogue was to remind my ego that everything ended up working out okay. It worked better than I thought because I took over that. And usually at the end, the way I wrap my conversations up was I asked ego's permission to let me try. And if I failed, it could tell me I was wrong. And if I needed to come back and talk to it again, would it be open to that? And every time we left on very good terms, and I could come back and have that conversation again. And now when I just process things, I mean, that literally took me like 15 minutes to a half an hour each time I went through this when I started. Now it is actually something that I can do in my head in like 5 seconds. I can just get right to it. My ego and I have a very good relationship set now. So it's used to talking to me and it knows when I'm doing that I already know what I'm going to do. And I'm going to tell my ego what I'm going to do, but we're going to stay on good terms.
When you talk about your ego, I know there's a lot of talk becoming popular about your shadow side. Is that kind of what you're talking about in that sense? Or are you talking more so just about there's like this persona there that's having these thoughts? Can you tell me a little bit more? Like, explain what you mean about the ego.
Yeah. So I don't think I think of it in that exact way, but it's not saying that some people might see it that way. The way I see it is I've always had voices in my head, right? Not like the kind that gets me committed to a facility in a straight jacket, but I've always had those voices in my head. Almost every single person that I've talked to has acknowledged in a raw conversation with each other that they have had voices in their head. Those are our egos trying to tell us what's right, what's wrong, what to be afraid of, what to enjoy, all these emotions that we feel, those are parts of our ego. And I learned this in a totally different sphere, but it ties in perfectly with this. There's two great groups of people in your life. One group loves you and doesn't want to see you get hurt. And the other group is jealous of you and doesn't want to see you succeed. And so what are both of these groups trying to do? Hold you back. And that's why your ego does such a good job at trying to convince you that you shouldn't do this because you don't want to get all these arrows in your back from people trying to pull you back. And you're like, yeah, but when I did that last time, I got to a place where I never imagined. I achieved something that I never thought was possible. I don't mind the arrows in my back if I get the joy and the happiness and the satisfaction after getting to that place that I have no idea what it is. And that's what I mean by my ego.
Sure. Thank you for clarifying that. I love to give takes on how we kind of all give meaning to maybe the same thing or look at things in a different way, but it's really, could be the same information underneath the surface. So if throughout this journey, what was the point where you realized that there was a deeper purpose or a deeper meaning behind this experience? And it sounds like maybe that was pretty early on.
Very early on.
Yeah.
It was within the first week, actually. That thing that I was waiting to figure out when I was processing all this, when I heard I had cancer, was that I knew my purpose was to become an advocate and make sure that I inform as many people as I can and help those people become their own advocates and encourage more people from their perspective to get screened for colorectal cancer. That was my purpose. And that's how it started. And that got me involved with, advocacy groups. It got me involved with taking on bigger roles within some of these nonprofits that I belong to. And, ultimately it connected me with so many amazing people that it led to what ended up being my, I don't want to use the word cure, but let's call it that, right?
Yeah. During this period of time when you were going through the protocols and on this journey, what were some of the things? How did you find the strength to persevere when I would imagine there was probably some really difficult moments in there and some setbacks? How did you find the resilience and the strength to keep going in those moments that were really tough throughout this journey?
Part of it, I think, was thinking about all the, in some of these conversations about all the times that I've been through really rough situations and made it through. Now, this was going to be completely different, but that was one part. The other part was the commitment that I made to my wife to do everything I could not to leave her. Obviously, I couldn't promise 100% that I wouldn't because we don't have any control over that, right? But and it might not be from cancer. I could walk out, and I used to say this all the time. I could walk out across the street and get hit by a car, and that would be, I'd be done today. The cancer wouldn't get me. The car would have. So doing my part to make sure that I held up to my bargain was the other component that really drove me. So when it was the darkest times, when I was in the most pain, when I was the most down, ultimately I remembered my option was being dead.
Sounds like there was a lot of accepting what is, even if it's not necessarily ideal or how you want it to be. And then it sounds like the love that you had for your wife and the promise that you made to her to do whatever you could was your why. And then there was this component of belief in yourself. Again, that belief, going back to the internal conversations that we have, are so powerful. That belief that you're going to make it through because you've made it through other hard things in life. Would you agree with that?
I love that you're using the word belief because I keep seeing hope all over the place in the cancer world. And to me, hope is just an empty 4-letter word because without the belief, we have no hope.
Yes. Well, and I truly believe also that our emotions influence our health, and that has a really, really big impact on what our emotions are. So the belief directly impacts how you're feeling, right? So if you believe that this is the end, then what's going to happen? That's going to influence how you feel. And if you're not feeling in a place where you can push through and persevere, just feeling really defeated and like you're going to give up, that to me, that influences the outcome.
Oh, absolutely.
I think that's so powerful. And I love that you are sharing that message of belief with other people going through similar struggles, maybe in their own way.
Shortly after I was diagnosed, I got overwhelmed and bombarded with information. Because like you said at the beginning, 1 in 3 adults are going to be diagnosed with cancer in their lifetime. So it's going to be in your family or close group of friends, absolutely almost certain. I just think that it's really just one of those things that I got this piece of information. Not all of it I processed and went in depth with, but because I learned early on what was for me and what wasn't for me. And I was grateful that they were sharing it with me, but I didn't go down that road. And I kept it in the drawer. So if I needed it later on, because everything else didn't work, I could explore it. But right now I didn't need it. But one person shared a documentary called Heal. And there's 2 things I learned from that. And the reason why I want to share this is because this is directly to what you're talking about now. One of the people said she had a healer or something, and she was calling the chemo poison, and I was calling the chemo poison as I watched this, and because it was, killing the cancer, but it was killing my good cells too, right? And as I learned my bones and my muscle joints and everything else. So I'm like, okay, well, yeah, that's what I'm doing. And the healer said, listen, if you have a headache, do you take aspirin? Yeah. What's that? Medicine. If you get sick, or have the flu, what do you take? Medicine, da, da, da. And she goes, so if the chemo is killing the cancer, why don't you look at it as medicine? And so ever since that point, I just really looked at it as medicine. And if the side effects were bad, I mean, I'm not going to make things up and say I just plowed right through it. There were times where I wanted to give up, and I wasn't going to, but I wanted to. But I just kind of looked at it like, is this all you got? Bring it on, make it through. If you want to give me something even rougher, I'm going to make it through it because this is what I got to do. This is what I'm going to do. And that's kind of the way I looked at it. But the other thing, and you brought this up a little while ago, is family, right? The connections that you have, the love that you have. And, I've already said, like, I'm not one who really looks at God the way most people look at God. And so when I hear people, ever since my teens, all the way up and through I got diagnosed, when I hear people say, I'll pray for you, or I'll put you on our prayer list, or I'll put you, I'm in a prayer warrior group and it's global and, I'll share your name in there. And I'm like, I'd say thank you, but then I just kind of dismiss it and move on. And I read this document or watched this documentary. One of the things in there, and I'm not going to go too far in depth on it because it was a few years ago. And I know the chemo probably killed a few brain cells too, but it was along the lines of everything in life came from originally 2 stars colliding. If life was born from the same cells, everything from our animals to us, our planets, to our sky was born from the same cells. That means we're all interconnected in a certain way. And cells have a way to communicate that we don't understand yet. And so no matter how far away you are, our cells have the power to still communicate with each other. And as soon as I read that or saw that, I'm like, wait a minute, I'm missing a huge opportunity here. Just because I don't call it praying, that's just their way of saying they want to send my cells good energy, healthy energy, positive vibes, whatever you want to say. That's what they're telling me. And so ever since then, I just thank you so much. I am receiving that with gratitude. It is helping me get to where I'm going because of you and you doing that for me. And I meant every word of it. And I truly received it. And I still feel like that's a way that my life has changed now about being open to any of the positive energy that anybody wants to share with me, regardless of how close or far we are, what country we live in, whether you know me or don't know me. Because if you want to send me that energy, that's going to help me. And I will be able to share that healthy energy with other people. And that's what I really, I love and I believe in right now.
I totally agree with you. I'm on completely the same page. I believe with all of my being that we are energy. Everything is energy. It absolutely affects your cells. And I do believe that there is no distance that can come in between. Energy connects regardless of where you are. I love how you reframed that for yourself, because I think that's also part of a really big problem, I guess, that's going on in the world right now, is that we maybe don't think about things the same as somebody over here. Maybe we have different views on how we see things, but really, when you strip it all away, it's love. And if it's good intentions, I think that that's really powerful. And I just really want to commend you for reframing that in a way where you were able to receive that, because I think that that too is such a powerful thing.
Yeah, I do not think I'd be sitting here talking to you if I didn't make that change and reframe it that way. I honestly do not think I'd be here.
Now we're 4 years later, because this was 2020, right? 2020. And we're in 2024 at the time of this podcast. So how do you feel that your life is different or transformed as a result of your experiences and going through what you have?
I think it's very different in the way that I've changed what's important to me. Not everything, but a lot of things. I'm not nearly as, possessed with material things anymore. Well, I won't say that really hasn't changed too much. I think the other thing too is just who I choose to spend my energy around. Because, when we're talking about this, right? I mean, there's obviously, I think everybody's capable of having that love energy, or, that you call it, right? But obviously, some people have an energy that kind of drains your energy, and other people have an energy that lifts your energy up. And I don't really have too much time, because I've realized how precious life is now, to be spending my time around too many people that have energy that drain me.
I agree. So I know that you started a nonprofit as a result of this. Can you tell everybody a little bit about your nonprofit and what you're doing with that?
Yeah, well, I know I alluded to my surgery that I had and having that big scar. That was from a liver transplant that I got, because people are going to be like, well, you had colon cancer. How did you have a liver transplant? But my tumor was in my colon, and your primary tumor, if it spreads, it metastasizes and it moves to a different organ. And so mine moved to my liver, which is pretty common for colorectal cancer. Everything was responding well to chemo, but I would probably never have chemo kill all the cancer in my liver, because it was just too much. So I found out about a liver transplant, pursued that for 14 months, because most colorectal cancer patients pursuing a liver transplant have to find their own living donor. As I started this, I was in a group of people that were transplant patients that had colorectal cancer. It's only about 6 or 7 years in the US now, so it's a fairly new kind of treatment option. But as I was talking to them, everybody was saying that they had like 5 or 6 people get screened that weren't a match for them before they found their actual donor. And I'm like, well, I know it's not going to be 100%, but there's probably going to be a group of those people, like 1 or 2 from each person. We'll just want to donate to anybody that they can help, not just that one person. So why don't I start trying to create a site where I can match, people interested in donating with people searching for liver donors. And I created Share My Liver. And then after my transplant, because I finally did get a transplant in May of 2023, I kind of changed the focus from, matching is still at the core, but we're not a matching service. We ignite connections, basically. So we get people interested and aware of the fact that they can be a living liver donor, because most people that I've talked to all through these last couple of years have, I tell them about this and they're like, how are you getting it from a person who's alive? How do you know they're going to die? And I'm like, no, they don't die. They're alive. Their liver regenerates. And they're like, it does. And I'm like, yeah, it's an amazing organ. And, so just getting that awareness out. And then the second thing is really helping people pursuing a living donor navigate through that process of the emotional roller coaster of thinking you have a donor, then you don't. And, how you deal with that, how you deal with the surgery, how you deal with your recovery. And then thirdly is, I know quite a few of the people who've gotten transplants in America with colorectal cancer. And there is not one non-white person who's gotten a transplant. And so I've talked with the oncology teams and the transplant teams, and there's nothing from a biological or genetic standpoint that would mean minorities wouldn't be eligible for this. But I know the healthcare system, and I know we have healthcare disparities. And I have a feeling that that's playing a large role in this. And so it's about making sure that we have funds available to help people that don't have the financial resources to be able to pursue a liver transplant, to remove that barrier so that they can actually get one done.
Wow, that is so powerful. Thank you so much, Tim, for just everything that you're doing. I mean, this is not only life-changing for you, like because of everything that you've gone through, but you're impacting so many other people in such a positive way because of your experience. So I appreciate you. Thank you so much for sharing your story and for starting this website and this nonprofit, because I think that this is a powerful thing for you to be doing. So thank you.
Jen?
So can you tell people how to find out more information about maybe if they want to be a donor? What is your website where people can go and learn more about what you're doing?
It's sharemyliver.org. So just all three words all squished together with no spaces or dashes or anything. And it gives you kind of a whole overview of what the living donor process is like, what it entails, what the recovery is like. And if you are interested, we actually are just starting a community now. So you can, on the website, you can join the community and you can either push that you're interested in being a donor and set up your profile so we know your blood type. We don't share that or publish that. We just have it so that we can match you with other people or, ignite some of those connections. Just wanting to support. You don't want to donate, but you want to learn more about it. You want to learn how we're going to get going. I will warn, it's pretty quiet right now, but it's going to be growing, over the next year. So, we'd love to have as many supporters come in, because the last thing you want to do going through all this treatment is have to be your own advocate like that. And it's so nice to have supporters to help you advocate and find your donor. So that's what we're looking for supporters for.
I love it. Well, I'm going to help you in any way that I can share this information and get this out there. And I also really love that there's a focus on minorities. I think that that's so important. So I really, really would love to help you in any way that I can. And my last and final question before we close up this podcast is, and I think maybe you've already answered it, but I would love to hear your thoughts, is what sort of a legacy do you hope to leave behind in the future from now, whenever it is your time? What is the legacy that you hope to leave?
I would love to leave a legacy that, I'm kind of focused on the liver transplant. So I would love to leave a legacy that I made this more of a mainstream treatment option instead of a, test or fringe kind of treatment option.
I love it. Thank you, Tim, so much for being here with me today. Thank you for sharing your story. I think that it is a powerful story. I think that it's one that a lot of people can relate to in being touched by somebody, like I said, who has cancer. I believe in you. I believe in what you're doing. And thank you so much for being here with me today.
Thank you.